When Shaquille O'Neal received that heartbreaking call about his proud older sister Serena living in a rundown motel with her two teenagers after being evicted, he never imagined it would lead to the most powerful journey of his life, one of forgiveness, sacrifice, and a brother finally keeping the promise he made long ago to never let family fall through the cracks. Shaquille O'Neal stood on the wide balcony of his lakeside estate, the warm Carolina breeze gently rustling the leaves of the old oak trees. The sun was setting over Lake Norman, turning the water into liquid gold and painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. At 58, life had finally slowed down enough for him to enjoy moments like this. No more back-to-back games, no more endless travel. His businesses were running smooth. The Charlotte Hornets were finally turning a corner, and he could sit with a glass of whiskey and just breathe. For the first time in decades, he felt something close to peace. His private phone vibrated on the teak table beside him. Shaq picked it up and saw his cousin Derek's name. They didn't talk every week anymore, but family was family. He answered with a relaxed smile in his voice. "Derek, what's up, man? Been too long." The pause on the other end was too long. When Derek finally spoke, his voice was heavy, almost broken. "Mike, I'm really sorry to call you like this, but it's Serena. She's in serious trouble, brother." Just hearing his older sister's name made Shaq's stomach drop. Serena had always been the strong one in the family, the big sister who protected him, pushed him, and believed in him when no one else did. 4 years older, tough as nails, and way too proud to ever ask for help from anyone, especially her famous little brother. "What happened?" Shaq asked, his deep voice suddenly tight. He set the whiskey glass down so hard it nearly tipped over. "Is she okay? Tell me straight." Derek let out a shaky breath. "She got evicted from her apartment last week. She's staying at that sketchy Pinewood Motel off Highway 49 with Jamal and Kayla. It's bad, Mike. Really bad. She lost her teaching job when the community center got shut down and the new landlords jacked up the rent. She's been working whatever part-time gigs she can find, but it's not enough. The kids are trying to act like everything's normal. Jamal's picking up extra shifts after school. Kayla won't even tell her friends they're living in a motel. But Serena, she's breaking, man. I've seen her cry when she thinks no one's watching." Shaq felt the world tilt beneath his feet. His own sister living in a cheap motel with 2 teenagers, while he was standing in a mansion with 9 bedrooms and more money than most people could spend in a lifetime. The guilt hit him like a freight train, heavy and immediate. "She made me swear not to tell you," Derek continued, his voice thick with emotion. "Said she didn't want to be the sister who failed and had to run to Shaq for help. You know how she is. Always the one who sacrificed everything for everybody else. She gave up her own college dreams so the family could survive. Worked doubles to buy you those first real basketball shoes when Dad couldn't afford them. She's too damn proud, Mike. But I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I can't watch her and those kids struggle like this." Shaq walked back inside, the silence of the huge house pressing down on him. Memories flooded his mind, Serena sitting through every one of his high school games, cheering like he was already a star even after he got cut from the team. Serena slipping him $20 she couldn't spare when he left for college. Serena always putting everyone else first. Parents, kids, students, never once asking him for a single thing. "I'm driving to Charlotte first thing tomorrow morning," Shaq said, his voice low and determined. He was already opening his calendar, canceling meetings, appearances, everything. "Don't worry about her being mad at you. I'd rather her be furious with both of us than keep living like that." After he hung up, Shaq stood frozen in the middle of his trophy room. The 6 NBA championship trophies gleamed under soft lights, but they suddenly felt hollow. He walked over to the safe, pulled out an old shoebox, and took out the pair of worn Converse Serena had bought him as a kid. He ran his fingers over the cracked leather, remembering the pride in her eyes when she handed them to him. "Every superhero needs the right shoes, little brother," she had said with that big smile. "Now go show the world what you can do." Tears burned in his eyes as the full weight of his absence crashed over him. How had he let years slip by with just quick phone calls and holiday visits? How had he missed his sister struggling so badly? He sat down heavily, clutching those old shoes like a lifeline, the echo of a promise he had made her long ago ringing in his ears, that none of them would ever have to worry again. Tomorrow he would face her. Tomorrow he would try to make things right. But right now, all Shaq could feel was the deep ache of regret and a fierce determination building inside his chest. This wasn't just about money or fixing a problem. This was about family, and he wasn't going to lose them again. Not if he could help it. The next morning, Shaq didn't roll up in anything flashy. He chose a plain black SUV with tinted windows and drove himself down to Charlotte, the highway blurring past as memories kept hitting him like waves. He remembered Serena at 17, working extra shifts at a diner just to buy him those first real basketball shoes when their parents were scraping by. She had handed him the box with that proud smile and said, "You can't fly in those old beat-up ones, Mike. Now go show them what you're made of." How had he let so much time pass without being there for her, the way she had always been there for him? He pulled into the Pinewood Motel parking lot a little after 10. The place looked even worse in the daylight. Faded yellow paint peeling off the walls, cracked asphalt, and an overall feeling of quiet desperation hanging in the thick summer air. Shaq's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as he sat there for a minute, heart hammering. This was his big sister, the one who had never asked him for anything. He took a deep breath and walked toward room 118, each step feeling heavier than the last. He knocked 3 times. The door opened just a crack. Serena's eyes met his, widening in shock before narrowing with that familiar stubborn fire. She looked exhausted, gray streaks in her hair, lines of worry etched deeper into her face. But those eyes were still sharp, still full of the strength he remembered from their childhood. "Derek called you," she said, her voice flat but edged with something raw. "I told him not to." Shaq nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Yeah, he did. Sis, let me in. Please. I had to come." Serena stared at him for a long moment, like she was fighting a war inside herself. Finally, she sighed and opened the door wider. "Fine, but I'm telling you right now, Mike, we're managing. I don't need you turning this into one of your big rescue stories." The small room felt even smaller once he stepped inside. 2 double beds took up most of the space. A mini fridge hummed loudly next to a wobbly table with a microwave on it. Textbooks and notebooks were stacked neatly on one bed, like Serena was still trying desperately to keep life normal for her kids. The air smelled like cheap cleaner and quiet desperation. Shaq's chest tightened so hard it hurt. "Where are Jamal and Kayla?" he asked gently. "Jamal's working his shift at the grocery store. Kayla's at the library trying to stay ahead in school," Serena answered, arms crossed tight over her chest. She stayed standing, refusing to sit. "They don't need to see their uncle showing up like this." Shaq lowered himself into the single chair by the window anyway. "Serena, come on. A motel room with 2 teenagers? How long were you planning to keep this hidden from me?" Her jaw clenched. "As long as it took to get us out of here on my own. I've handled worse. I raised you when nobody else thought you had a shot. I gave up my college plans so the family wouldn't fall apart. Worked doubles, night classes, everything. I'm not about to become the sister who couldn't make it and had to beg her rich little brother for help. My kids are watching me. I want them to see that we can stand on our own 2 feet. The words cut deep, because Shaq knew everyone Chapter 2. The painful reunion at the motel. The next morning, Shaq didn't roll up in anything flashy. He chose a plain black SUV with tinted windows and drove himself down to Charlotte, the highway blurring past as memories kept hitting him like waves. He remembered Serena at 17, working extra shifts at a diner just to buy him those first real basketball shoes when their parents were scraping by. She had handed him the box with that proud smile and said, "You can't fly in those old beat-up ones, Mike. Now go show them what you're made of." How had he let so much time pass without being there for her, the way she had always been there for him? He pulled into the Pinewood Motel parking lot a little after 10. The place looked even worse in the daylight. Faded yellow paint peeling off the walls, cracked asphalt, and an overall feeling of quiet desperation hanging in the thick summer air. Shaq's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as he sat there for a minute, heart hammering. This was his big sister, the one who had never asked him for anything. He took a deep breath and walked toward room 118, each step feeling heavier than the last. He knocked 3 times. The door opened just a crack. Serena's eyes met his, widening in shock before narrowing with that familiar, stubborn fire. She looked exhausted. Gray streaks in her hair, lines of worry etched deeper into her face. But those eyes were still sharp, still full of the strength he remembered from their childhood. "Derek called you," she said, her voice flat but edged with something raw. "I told him not to." Shaq nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Yeah, he did. Sis, let me in, please. I had to come." Serena stared at him for a long moment, like she was fighting a war inside herself. Finally, she sighed and opened the door wider. "Fine, but I'm telling you right now, Mike, we're managing. I don't need you turning this into one of your big rescue stories." The small room felt even smaller once he stepped inside. 2 double beds took up most of the space. A mini fridge hummed loudly next to a wobbly table with a microwave on it. Textbooks and notebooks were stacked neatly on one bed, like Serena was still trying desperately to keep life normal for her kids. The air smelled like cheap cleaner and quiet desperation. Shaq's chest tightened so hard it hurt. "Where are Jamal and Kayla?" he asked gently. "Jamal's working his shift at the grocery store. Kayla's at the library trying to stay ahead in school," Serena answered, arms crossed tight over her chest. She stayed standing, refusing to sit. "They don't need to see their uncle showing up like this." Shaq lowered himself into the single chair by the window anyway. "Serena, come on. A motel room with 2 teenagers? How long were you planning to keep this hidden from me?" Her jaw clenched. "As long as it took to get us out of here on my own. I've handled worse. I raised you when nobody else thought you had a shot. I gave up my college plan so the family wouldn't fall apart. Worked doubles, night classes, everything. I'm not about to become the sister who couldn't make it and had to beg her rich little brother for help. My kids are watching me. I want them to see that we can stand on our own 2 feet. The words cut deep, because Shaq knew every one of them was true. He leaned forward, eyes burning. "I'm not here because I feel sorry for you. I'm here because you're my sister, and I love you. I should have been around more. I got caught up in my own world, and I let too much time slip by. But I'm here now. I've got connecting suites at a good hotel, ready for you and the kids. Just until we figure out the next steps. No charity, just family helping family." Serena shook her head, her voice cracking for the first time. "No, Mike. I'm not letting Jamal and Kayla think the only way forward is Uncle Shaq riding in with money to fix everything. They've seen me fight through every hard thing life has thrown at us. I won't take that lesson away from them." Before Shaq could respond, the door opened again. Kayla walked in first, backpack slung over one shoulder, and froze when she saw him. "Uncle Mike?" she whispered, eyes wide with surprise and a flicker of hope she quickly tried to hide. A moment later, Jamal stepped inside wearing his green grocery store apron, stopping short, too. Shaq stood up, forcing a warm smile even as his heart broke seeing them. "Hey, you two. Look at you both. All grown up and taller than I remember." He noticed Jamal's shoes had holes wearing through at the toes, and Kayla's brave little smile couldn't quite cover the exhaustion in her young face. The 4 of them ended up at a quiet diner nearby after the kids gently begged their mom. Over simple burgers and fries, conversation stayed careful at first, But when Kayla shyly talked about her latest science project and Jamal mentioned picking up extra shifts, the weight of what they were all carrying became impossible to ignore. "I want to help," Shaq said quietly toward the end, looking straight into Serena's eyes. "Not out of pity, because you're my blood, and I've missed too many years already. Let me be there for you the way you've always been there for me." Serena looked down at her coffee cup for a long moment, fighting back tears she refused to let fall in front of the kids. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but steady. "Love isn't always enough, Mike. Sometimes you've got to let people keep their pride. I've always been proud to be your sister, but I won't let my kids grow up thinking we only made it because you saved us." The lunch ended with Serena gathering Jamal and Kayla and walking them toward the bus stop, her back straight and proud, even though her world was crumbling around her. Shaq watched them go from his car, Jamal glancing back once with a look that said everything. "She's scared, Uncle Mike. Scared for us." As he drove away, Shaq felt a fire building in his chest. This wasn't going to be easy. Serena's pride ran deep, and the road ahead would be full of hard conversations and even harder choices. But for the first time in years, he knew exactly what he had to do. He wasn't just going to help his sister. He was going to fight for the family they once had, and maybe build something even stronger. The question now was whether Serena would let him. The next day, Shaq couldn't sit still. Instead of heading straight back to Serena, he drove to the old West Side Community Center where she had worked for years. The building looked abandoned, boarded-up windows, weeds pushing through cracks in the parking lot, and a big "for sale" sign posted out front like a final insult. Shaq parked and just sat there for a while, staring at the place that had meant everything to his sister. This wasn't just a job for Serena. It was her calling, helping kids who reminded her of the way they grew up. He got out and started walking around the fence when an elderly woman pushing a shopping cart slowed down nearby. She glanced at the building, shook her head sadly, then noticed him. Shaq rolled down his window. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said gently. "Did you know this place?" The woman turned, squinting at him for a second before her eyes widened in recognition. "I've volunteered here for 12 years, she said, her voice warm but tired. "Mrs. Evelyn Grant ran it alongside your sister Serena. That woman fought like hell to keep the center open. Brought kids to city council meetings, gathered signatures, stayed late every night helping with homework. She never gave up on these children." Shaq felt his throat tighten. He asked if Mrs. Grant was still around. The woman pointed down the block to a small blue house with flowers in the window boxes. "She's there. Go see her. She'll tell you what really happened." A few minutes later, Shaq knocked on the door of the little blue house. Mrs. Evelyn Grant opened it, a petite woman in her 70s with sharp eyes behind round glasses. When she realized who was standing on her porch, she let out a soft laugh. "Well, I'll be. Shaquille O'Neal at my door. Come on in, son." The living room was small but cozy, filled with books and framed photos. Mrs. Grant poured him some iced tea and sat across from him. "Serena didn't tell you any of this, did she?" she asked, knowingly. "That girl is proud as they come. She fought harder than anyone to save this center. Brought children to speak at meetings. Showed the council how many kids would be left with nowhere to go. She even tried to find private funding on her own, but money and politics won out." Shaq listened, his chest heavy. Then Mrs. Grant stood up slowly and led him to a back room. On one wall hung a faded bulletin board labeled West Side Scholars. She pointed to the photos and notes still pinned there. "Look at this," she said softly, her voice full of pride and sadness. "Every kid who kept their grades up got their picture here. Serena made sure of it. For a lot of them, it was the first time anyone celebrated them for something good." She gently touched one photo of a teenage boy wearing a graduation cap. "This one right here, Marcus. He was headed down the wrong road. Serena stayed late with him every single day for months, tutored him, encouraged him, believed in him when no one else did. He's in college now, first one in his family, all because Serena never gave up on him. Shaq stared at the photo, tears stinging his eyes. This was his sister's real legacy, not the fame or money attached to his name, but the quiet, everyday difference she made in kids' lives. He thought about Jamal and Kayla, trying to stay strong in that motel room, and felt a fresh wave of guilt mixed with fierce love. Later that afternoon, Shaq walked into a sleek glass tower downtown for a meeting with Preston Hale, the CEO of the development company that had bought Serena's old apartment complex. The contrast hit him hard: shiny offices and expensive suits versus the struggling neighborhood he had just left. Preston greeted him with a polished smile. "Mr. O'Neill, what an unexpected pleasure. I hear you're interested in some properties." Shaq didn't smile back. "I'm here about the West Side Community Center and Highland Terrace apartments. My sister lived there. She lost her job when the center closed and then got pushed out when your company raised the rents." Preston leaned back in his chair, his expression cool. "Business is business, Mr. O'Neill. We're revitalizing the area. New housing, higher property values. Some displacement is unfortunate, but necessary for progress." Shaq stood up slowly, towering over the desk. His voice stayed calm, but carried real fire. "You call it progress. I call it tearing apart families and neighborhoods. You took my sister's home and the place where she helped hundreds of kids. Name your price. I'm buying it all." Preston's smile faltered. "Those properties aren't for sale right now. We have plans." "Everything has a price," Shaq cut in. "And I can pay more than you'll ever make squeezing people out. You've got 48 hours. After that, I'll make sure every person in Charlotte knows exactly how your company does business." As Shaq rode the elevator back down, a cold clarity settled over him. This wasn't just about helping Serena anymore. It was about fighting for the community she loved, for the kids she believed in, and for the family he had let slip away. He pulled out his phone and started making calls. The fight was just beginning, and he wasn't backing down. Not this time. Shaq didn't waste any time. The very next afternoon, he was back in that sleek uptown office tower, sitting across from Preston Hale again. The developer looked a little less polished this time, like he knew this meeting wasn't going to be easy. Shaq's lawyer Drew had already laid the groundwork, but this part, looking the man in the eye, Shaq wanted to handle himself. "I'll make this simple," Shaq said, his voice low and steady. "I want the community center building, Highland Terrace apartments, and the 2 other complexes you bought in that neighborhood. Name your price." Preston leaned back in his expensive leather chair, trying to keep that smooth businessman smile on his face. "Mr. O'Neill, those properties aren't currently listed for sale. We have long-term redevelopment plans, luxury condos, retail space, things that will bring real economic growth to the area." Shaq stared at him without blinking. "Growth for who? Not the families who've lived there for generations. Not the kids who lost their safe place after school when the center closed. You raised the rent so high my sister couldn't afford it anymore. She lost her job because your company and some city council folks decided that neighborhood didn't matter." The tension in the room thickened. Preston's smile faded. "This is how development works. Some people get displaced. It's unfortunate, but necessary for progress. Charlotte is changing." "Progress?" Shaq's voice rose just a little, the anger he had been holding back starting to show. He stood up slowly, his tall frame towering over the desk. Preston instinctively leaned back. "You took my sister's home. You took the place where she spent years helping kids believe they could have a better future. Kids like the ones she mentored who are now in college because she refused to give up on them. You call that progress?" Preston tried to stay calm. "We offered relocation assistance. We followed all the legal—" Shaq cut him off, his deep voice filling the room. "You took my sister's home and her life's work. Name your price before I make sure every person in Charlotte knows exactly what kind of man you are. I'll go on every news station, every radio show, every community meeting. I'll tell them how you pushed out working families so you could build luxury places most of them could never afford. Your choice." The silence that followed was heavy. Preston's face had gone pale. He knew Shaq wasn't bluffing. The power in the room had shifted completely. After a long pause, Preston finally spoke, his voice quieter now. "I'll have to discuss this with my board. This is highly unusual." "You do that," Shaq said, heading for the door. 48 hours. After that, the conversation changes." As Shaq rode the elevator down, his hands were still clenched. He stepped out into the bright afternoon light and immediately called his lawyer. "Drew, set up the James Jordan Community Foundation today. Name it after my dad. We're buying those properties and turning that center back into something special, something that can't be taken away." That night, back in his hotel room, Shaq sat quietly looking at an old family photo he had brought with him. His father, James, smiling proudly in the center, his mother beside him, and young Serena with her arm around little Mike's shoulder. He whispered to the photo, "I'm fixing this, Dad. For Serena. For the kids. For all of us." The weight of what he was about to do settled on him. This wasn't just business anymore. It was personal. It was about redemption, about love, and about finally showing up for the family he had let drift away. Shaq knew the real fight was only beginning, but for the first time in a long while, his heart felt completely in it. He was ready. While the lawyers worked on the paperwork and the renovation plan started moving, Shaq tried to give Serena some space. He knew pushing too hard would only make her pull away more. But life didn't wait. 2 days later, his phone rang while he was meeting with the architect. It was the school. Jamal had gotten into a fight. Shaq drove straight to the school, heart pounding. When he walked into the office, Serena was already there, sitting beside Jamal. She looked completely worn out, eyes red, shoulders slumped like the weight of the world was finally care. "Mom, I'm sorry," Jamal mumbled as Shaq stepped in. "They were talking trash about our situation, saying we're broke and living in a motel. I lost it." Serena's voice was barely above a whisper, exhausted. "Jamal, fighting isn't the answer. We've talked about this." But even as she said it, a tear slipped down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away, trying to stay strong in front of her son and the school staff. Shaq's chest ached seeing them like this. He quietly sat down on Jamal's other side. The principal gave them a moment alone after explaining the suspension details. As soon as the door closed, Jamal broke. "Uncle Shaq," the teenager said, his voice cracking. "Mom pretends everything's fine, but I hear her crying at night when she thinks we're asleep. She stays up late filling out job applications and trying to figure out how to keep us fed and in school. I just wanted to protect her. I'm supposed to be the man of the house now, right?" The raw pain in Jamal's words hit Shaq like a punch to the gut. He put a big hand on his nephew's shoulder, fighting back his own emotions. "You don't have to carry all that alone, son. That's what family is for. Your mom is one of the strongest people I know, but even strong people need help sometimes." Serena looked away, wiping her eyes. "Mike, don't. I've got this. We've always figured it out." But Shaq could see she was barely holding on. He spoke gently. "Serena, I'm not here to take over. I'm not offering luxury hotels or throwing money around to make myself feel better. I just want to help you rebuild what you lost. A real place to stay. A chance for the kids to have somewhere safe after school. No handouts. Just family stepping up the way you stepped up for me my whole life." Serena was quiet for a long time. Jamal looked between them, hopeful but nervous. Finally, she let out a shaky breath. "I'm so tired, Mike. I'm tired of pretending we're okay when we're not. But I still don't want charity. If you help, it has to be on my terms. I need to feel like I'm still standing on my own feet." Shaq nodded, relief washing over him. "Your terms. Always. We'll figure this out together." As they left the school, Shaq walked beside his sister and nephew, the weight of the moment heavy but hopeful. Jamal stayed close to his mom, and for the first time in weeks, Serena didn't pull away when Shaq put a gentle hand on her shoulder. It wasn't fixed yet, not by a long shot, but something small had shifted. A door had cracked open, and Shaq was determined not to let it close again. The road ahead would still be hard, but at least now they were starting to walk it side by side. The papers were signed faster than anyone expected. Shaq didn't haggle over every dollar. He just wanted it done. Within days, the community center building, the old apartment complex where Serena had lived, and 2 nearby properties were officially his. He named the new foundation the James Jordan Community Foundation, after their dad. It felt right. Their father had always believed in hard work, family, and giving back to the neighborhood. This was Shaq's way of honoring that. He brought in Sandra, the architect who had designed his own home, and Marcus Reed, a former NBA player he trusted like a brother. Marcus had gone through his own rough times after retirement and now ran youth programs up north. "I need someone who gets it," Shaq told him. "Someone who understands these kids and what this place can mean." The 3 of them met early one morning at the boarded-up center. The place looked rough. Broken windows, water stains on the ceilings, weeds everywhere. But Shaq saw a possibility. "We're not just fixing a building," he said quietly. "We're giving my sister and these kids their hope back." While the crews started tearing out the old damaged parts, Shaq surprised everyone by showing up in plain work clothes, old t-shirt, jeans, and work boots. No celebrity treatment. He grabbed a hammer and joined the workers ripping out rotten drywall. At first they were shocked, but after a few hours they relaxed around him. Sweat poured down his face as he worked beside them, lifting beams and carrying debris. There was something peaceful about the physical labor. It gave him time to think. He kept remembering all the years he had missed. Serena's kids growing up without him around much. Holidays where he was on the phone instead of really present. He thought about Jamal's bruised face and the way Serena had looked so tired at the school. Every swing of the hammer felt like he was trying to hammer those regrets into something better. Marcus Reed walked over during a water break, wiping his own forehead. "Never thought I'd see Shaq O'Neal doing manual labor like this," he said with a grin. "You good, man?" Shaq looked around at the half-torn building and nodded slowly. "Yeah. For the first time in a while, I feel like I'm doing something that really matters. Not for the cameras or the legacy, just for family. Serena gave up so much for me when we were kids. It's my turn to show up for her." The days blurred together with saws buzzing and hammers pounding. Shaq stayed late most evenings, helping wherever he was needed. One afternoon, he found himself in what used to be the main activity room. He picked up a faded photo that had fallen from the old bulletin board. Serena smiling with a group of kids. His eyes got misty as he carefully dusted it off and set it aside to save. By the end of the first week, the basic structure was starting to take shape. New walls were going up, the old basketball court was being prepped for resurfacing, and plans for a bigger computer lab and library were coming together. Shaq stood in the middle of it all one evening as the sun went down, covered in dust and sweat, feeling more grounded than he had in years. This secret renovation wasn't just about buildings, it was about healing, about proving to Serena that he was all in, and about making sure no more kids in this neighborhood had to wonder if anyone believed in them. Shaq wiped his hands on his jeans and made a quiet promise to himself. No matter how hard Serena fought him on accepting help, he wasn't going anywhere. This time, he was staying. Word traveled fast in the neighborhood, faster than Shaq expected. Serena found out about the purchases before he could sit her down and explain everything himself. She stormed into the half-renovated center one afternoon, while Shaq was helping carry in new lumber, her face flushed with anger and hurt. "Mike, what did you do?" she demanded, her voice echoing through the big room. Workers quietly stepped back, sensing the storm coming. "I just heard from Mrs. Grant that you bought the center. And the apartments. My old building. You went behind my back and bought everything?" Shaq set down the wood he was carrying and wiped his hands on his jeans. He had known this moment was coming, but it still hit hard seeing the pain in her eyes. "Serena, I was going to tell you. I wanted to show you the plans when they were further along. This isn't what you think." Serena stepped closer, her hands shaking. "Not what I think. The whole neighborhood is talking about how Shaquille O'Neal is swooping in to save his poor sister. I spent my whole life not being Shaq's sister. I built my own career, raised my kids, stood on my own 2 feet even when it was hard. Now everyone's going to look at me like the charity case you had to rescue, like I failed." Her voice cracked on the last word, and it broke something in Shaq. He took a step toward her, but stopped when she held up her hand. "Serena, listen to me. This isn't about rescue. I'm not doing this to make myself look good or to pity you. I'm doing this because I finally realized how much I let you down. You sacrificed everything for me when we were kids. Your college dreams, your time, your money. You believed in me when I got cut from the team and wanted to quit. This is me finally keeping the promise I made to you on that porch years ago. Family doesn't get left behind." Serena shook her head, tears streaming down her face now. "You don't get it, Mike. I didn't want your money. I wanted my brother. The one who used to call just to talk. Not the billionaire who shows up with buildings and foundations. Do you know how it feels to have everyone whisper that I only got this because of you? That I couldn't keep a roof over my own kids' heads without my famous brother stepping in?" Shaq's own eyes filled with tears. He stepped closer, his voice rough with emotion. "I know I messed up. I got caught up in my world and forgot what matters most. But I'm here now. I'm not going anywhere. This center isn't just for you. It's for all the kids who need what you gave them for years. A safe place. Someone who believes in them. And yes, it's for Jamal and Kayla too. They deserve better than a motel room and worrying about their mom every night." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were distant hammers and the faint echo of their breathing. Serena wiped her face, looking around at the work happening, the new walls, the cleared space where the basketball court would be. Something in her expression softened just a little, but the hurt was still there, raw and deep. "I need time, Mike," she said quietly. "I need to think. This is a lot. You can't just fix everything with money and expect me to be okay with it right away." Shaq nodded, respecting her space even though it hurt. "Take all the time you need, but know this. I'm not doing any of this to take away your pride. I'm doing it because I love you, and I'm finally ready to show up like the brother you deserve." As Serena walked out, shoulders still tense but steps a little slower, Shaq stood there in the half-finished room, feeling the full weight of their complicated love. The confrontation had been painful, but it was honest. And sometimes honesty was the only way to start healing what had been broken for too long. He picked up his hammer again, determined to keep working, not just on the building, but on the bridge back to his sister. The argument with Serena left a heavy cloud over everything. Shaq kept working on the center during the day, but at night he couldn't sleep, replaying her words in his head. He gave her space like he promised, but he worried constantly. A few days later, his phone rang while he was helping install new windows. It was Jamal, voice shaking. "Uncle Mike, something's wrong with Mom. She collapsed at the motel. She's not waking up right." Shaq dropped everything and drove faster than he should have. When he burst into the motel room, Serena was lying on one of the beds, pale and barely conscious. Kayla was holding a wet cloth to her forehead, tears streaming down her face. Jamal stood frozen, looking terrified. "She hasn't been eating much," Kayla whispered. "And she's been so stressed. She kept saying she was fine." Shaq didn't hesitate. He scooped Serena up in his arms like she weighed nothing and carried her to his SUV. "We're going to the hospital right now," he said, voice tight with fear. The drive felt endless. He kept glancing at his sister in the passenger seat, her head lolling weakly, and prayed harder than he had in years. At the emergency room, doctors moved fast. Exhaustion, severe dehydration, and stress had taken their toll. They hooked her up to IVs and monitors while Shaq paced the waiting room with Jamal and Kayla. The kids looked so small and scared. Shaq pulled them both into a hug. "She's tough," he told them. "She's going to be okay. We're all going to be okay." Hours later, the doctor let them in. Serena was awake but weak, lying in the hospital bed with tubes in her arm. When she saw Shaq and the kids, her eyes filled with tears. Shaq sat on the edge of the bed and gently took her hand. It felt so small and fragile in his big palm. "I'm sorry," Serena whispered, her voice hoarse. "I didn't mean to scare everybody. I was so scared the kids would end up like so many others in the neighborhood, without hope, without someone fighting for them. I thought if I pushed harder, worked more, I could fix it all myself." Shaq squeezed her hand, his own eyes wet. "You don't have to do it alone anymore, Serena. I'm here. I've been here the whole time, even when I was too blind to show it properly. I'm not letting you carry this by yourself. Not anymore." Jamal stepped closer, tears in his eyes. "Mom, please let Uncle Mike help. We need you. I need you." Serena looked at her children, then back at her brother. For the first time in a long while, the walls seemed to crack just a little more. "I was so afraid of losing my pride that I almost lost everything else," she whispered. Shaq leaned down and pressed his forehead gently against hers, the way they used to comfort each other as kids. "We're going to get through this together. You, me, the kids. No more going it alone, I promise." That night, as Serena rested under the doctor's watch, Shaq sat in the quiet hospital room, holding her hand while the kids slept in chairs nearby. The scare had been a wake-up call, louder than any argument. Life was too short and too fragile to keep letting pride and distance stand in the way. Shaq made a silent vow as he watched his sister sleep. He would rebuild more than just buildings. He would rebuild their family, and this time, nothing would stop him. Serena got stronger over the next week, but the hospital scare left its mark on everyone. Shaq made sure she had a quiet, comfortable temporary apartment near the kids' school, while the bigger plans moved forward. One afternoon, the family gathered at the half-finished center for a small celebration. Kayla had won first place in the regional science fair for her project on sustainable energy solutions for neighborhoods like theirs. When they handed her the award certificate at the school assembly, Kayla's eyes shone with pride. Later, back at the center, she ran straight to her mom and hugged her tight. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom," she said, voice full of emotion. "You stayed up late helping me even when you were exhausted. You always told me I could do hard things. This award is yours, too." Serena held her daughter close, tears in her eyes. "No, baby, this is all you. I'm so proud of the young woman you're becoming." Shaq watched from the side, his heart swelling. Seeing Kayla shine like that, crediting her mom's quiet strength, made everything feel worth it. Later that same day, Shaq took Jamal out to the old basketball court behind the center. The court was still rough, but they had cleared the weeds and put up temporary hoops. The two of them shot around in the golden evening light, just uncle and nephew. Jamal was quiet at first, then finally spoke while bouncing the ball. "Uncle Shaq, Mom always told me stories about you. How you got cut from the team as a sophomore and came home crying. But you didn't quit. You worked harder. She said you had fight in you even when nobody believed. I want to have that too. I don't want to be angry and fighting at school anymore. I want to be better. For Mom. For all of us." Shaq stopped dribbling and looked at his nephew, seeing so much of his younger self in the boy. He walked over and put a hand on Jamal's shoulder. "You already have that fight, Jamal. I see it every day. The way you look out for your mom and sister. The way you keep showing up even when things are hard. That's real strength. From his bag, Shaq pulled out a shoebox. Inside were the old Converse shoes Serena had bought him decades ago, cleaned up, restored, and looking almost new again. "These shoes changed my life," Shaq said, handing them to Jamal. "Your mom believed in me before anyone else. Now they're yours. Every time you lace them up, remember you've got that same fight in you. And you've got family behind you." Jamal took the shoes with trembling hands, eyes wide. He hugged Shaq tight, something he hadn't done since he was little. "Thank you, Uncle Mike. For real." As they continued shooting hoops together, laughing when Jamal sank a few nice shots, Shaq felt a deep peace settle over him. The kids were starting to heal too. Kayla was finding her voice through her passion for science, and Jamal was channeling his pain into something positive. They were all finding their way back to each other, one small breakthrough at a time. That evening, as the sun set over the half-finished center, Shaq watched Serena watching her children with a soft, hopeful smile. The road was still long, but moments like these made him believe they would make it. Together. The story broke sooner than anyone wanted. A local reporter somehow connected the dots and ran a piece titled, "NBA Legend Rescues Sister from Eviction." It spread like wildfire, picked up by bigger outlets, shared across social media, and suddenly the neighborhood was buzzing with cameras and questions. Serena saw the article first. She called Shaq, voice trembling with anger and humiliation. "They're painting me as some pitiful charity case you had to save," she said when he arrived at her temporary apartment. "My whole life I worked so hard not to be defined by your fame. Now the entire city thinks I'm just Shaq's struggling sister. How am I supposed to look my kids in the eye? How am I supposed to walk into that center with my head held high?" Shaq's heart twisted. He sat beside her on the couch, feeling helpless in a way he rarely did. "I'm sorry, Serena. I never wanted this. I tried to keep it quiet, but we'll face it together. You're not a charity case. You're the strongest person I know." The next morning, reporters were waiting outside the center. Shaq and Serena walked out side by side, the kids staying safely inside with Marcus Reed. Cameras flashed, microphones pushed forward. Questions flew at them like daggers. "Serena, how does it feel to be rescued by your famous brother?" one reporter shouted. "Is it true you were living in a motel before Shaq stepped in?" Serena's hands clenched at her sides. Shaq could see her fighting to hold it together. He stepped slightly in front, but she gently pushed forward anyway, her voice steady, even though her eyes were shining with unshed tears. "This center isn't about me or my personal struggles," she said clearly. "It's about the children who need a safe place. It's about the families in this neighborhood who deserve hope. My brother has been quietly helping communities for years, not for attention, but because it's right. That's the story you should be telling, not turning my life into some feel-good rescue narrative that embarrasses my children." Shaq stood right beside her, proud and protective. When another reporter asked why he hadn't helped sooner, his voice grew thick with emotion. "Because I wasn't paying enough attention. I got lost in my own world and missed what my own sister was going through. That's on me. But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving. This isn't about me being a hero. It's about family finally showing up for each other." The press conference was raw and painful, but something powerful shifted in that moment. Serena's courage in speaking her truth, refusing to be reduced to a victim, moved people. Some reporters lowered their microphones. A few community members who had gathered nearby started clapping. Later that evening, back at the center after the reporters finally left, Serena sat in her future office, staring at the wall. Shaq found her there and sat across from her. "You were incredible today," he said softly. "I don't know if I could have done what you did, standing up there with your head high after everything." Serena looked at him, tears finally falling freely. "It hurt, Mike. It hurt so much to have my hardest moments turned into public entertainment. But hearing you stand beside me, admitting your mistakes, that meant something. I've been so angry and scared for so long. Maybe it's time I let some of that go." Shaq reached across the desk and took her hand. "We're in this together now. No more hiding. No more distance. Whatever comes next, good or bad, we face it as family." For the first time in weeks, Serena didn't pull away. She squeezed his hand back, a small, tired smile breaking through the tears. The media storm had been brutal, but it had also forced them to stand together, and in that unity, something deeper was starting to heal. The kids peeked in moments later, sensing the shift, and the four of them sat together in the quiet office, talking, crying a little, and for the first time feeling like a real family again. The road ahead was still uncertain, but they were no longer walking it alone. A few days after the media frenzy began to die down, an unexpected visitor showed up at the center. Coach Harlan Brooks, Shaq's old mentor from Wilmington, walked slowly through the front doors, leaning on his cane but with the same sharp eyes Shaq remembered from childhood. The elderly man had driven all the way from home after hearing the news. "I had to come see this for myself," Coach Brooks said, pulling both Shaq and Serena into a gentle hug. "Your mother would be so proud." They gave him a tour of the half-finished center. As they walked, the old coach listened quietly, nodding at the progress. Finally, he asked to sit down with them in a quiet corner. From his coat pocket, he pulled out a faded envelope. "Your mother gave this to me before she passed," he said softly. "She made me promise to hold on to it until the right time. I think that time is now." Serena's hands trembled as she took the envelope. Inside was a letter in their mother's familiar handwriting, along with an old photo of her and Serena, hugging tightly, taken just days before she died. Shaq read the letter over Serena's shoulder, his throat tightening with every word. "My dearest Serena, if you're reading this, it means things got hard, and you finally let your brother know. I know how proud you are, baby. I asked you to never burden him, because I wanted him to fly without guilt weighing him down. But I also asked you to find a way to reach him if you ever truly needed help. Family isn't supposed to struggle alone. I'm so proud of both of you. Mike for chasing his dreams. You for being the heart of this family. Hold on to each other. No matter how far life pulls you apart, find your way back. Love always." Mom Serena's shoulders began to shake. Tears fell onto the letter as she whispered, "I tried so hard to keep both promises. I didn't call him directly, but I made sure Derek knew how bad it was. I hoped he would tell Mike. I was so scared, but I couldn't break my word to Mom completely." Shaq pulled his sister into his arms, holding her tight as years of distance, hurt, and unspoken love poured out between them. "You did good, Serena. You kept your promises and still reached out the only way you could. I'm the one who should have been paying closer attention. I'm so sorry I wasn't there when you needed me most." They cried together, deep, healing sobs that had been building for decades. Coach Brooks sat quietly nearby, a gentle smile on his face, eyes misty. "Your mother knew you two would need each other eventually. She was always the wisest one in the family." When the tears finally slowed, Serena looked up at Shaq, her face raw but lighter somehow. "I was so afraid of needing you that I almost lost you completely. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for fighting for us." Shaq kissed the top of her head like he used to when they were kids. "We're family. That's what we do. No more secrets. No more carrying everything alone. From now on, we do this together." Jamal and Kayla, who had been watching from the doorway, joined them. The five of them sat together, old coach, brother, sister, and the next generation, talking about their mother, sharing memories, and feeling her presence in the room. The hidden letter had unlocked something profound. The walls of pride and distance that had kept them apart for so long finally came tumbling down. That evening, as the sun set through the new windows of the center, Shaq and Serena stood shoulder to shoulder, looking at the progress around them. For the first time in years, the future felt full of hope instead of fear. Their mother's words had brought them home to each other, and this time they weren't letting go. The day of the grand opening finally arrived. The James Jordan Community Center stood transformed. Fresh paint, bright windows, a beautiful new basketball court, and spaces filled with books, computers, and hope. Balloons and streamers decorated the entrance, and the big sign bearing their father's name gleamed in the morning sun. The whole neighborhood turned out. Families, kids, former residents, and community elders filled the parking lot and spilled into the street. Shaq stood at the door with Serena, greeting people as they arrived. His sister looked nervous but radiant in a simple blue dress. For the first time in months, she seemed lighter, like a weight had finally lifted. When it was time for the ribbon cutting, Serena stepped up to the podium first. Her voice was steady but full of emotion as she spoke. "This center isn't just a building," she said, looking out at the crowd. "It's a promise that every child in this neighborhood has someone who believes in them. Thank you for trusting us with your kids, your hopes, and your futures." Shaq joined her, and together they cut the big red ribbon. The crowd cheered loudly as the doors opened wide. Children ran inside laughing, parents wiped tears, and old neighbors hugged each other. The energy was electric, full of joy, relief, and new beginnings. Inside, the celebrations continued. Shaq watched with a full heart as kids flooded the new computer lab, shot hoops on the gleaming court, and explored the library. Then a single mother approached Serena, holding her young daughter's hand. "Miss Serena," the woman said, voice thick with tears, "I just wanted to thank you. When the old center closed, I was lost. No job, no hope. You stayed late helping me with my resume and interview practice, even when you were struggling yourself. I got the job last week. My daughter has a safe place after school now. You gave us both a second chance." Serena hugged her tightly, both women crying. "You did the hard work," Serena whispered. "I'm just so happy for you." Not far away, a teenage boy who used to come to the old center walked up to Shaq. He was wearing a team jersey now. "Coach Serena helped me when I was about to drop out," he said. "She wouldn't let me quit. Now I'm leading the school basketball team and my grades are good enough for college applications. I just wanted you to know. She saved my life." Shaq felt tears sting his eyes as he shook the young man's hand. He looked across the room at Serena, who was surrounded by grateful families. In that moment, everything, the fights, the tears, the long nights of renovation, felt completely worth it. Later, as the sun began to set and the crowd started to thin, Shaq found Serena sitting quietly on the edge of the new basketball court. He sat beside her, shoulder to shoulder, just like when they were kids. "You did this, Serena," he said softly. "All these people are here because of your heart and your work." She leaned her head on his shoulder, watching kids still playing on the court. "We did this, Mike. Together. I couldn't have done any of it without you showing up the way you did." They sat in comfortable silence as laughter echoed around them. Former residents who had been pushed out were moving back into the renovated apartments at fair rents. Kids who once had nowhere to go now had a bright, safe space. And most importantly, a brother and sister who had found their way back to each other were watching it all with full hearts. The grand opening wasn't just the birth of a community center. It was the rebirth of a family, and the beginning of something that would touch hundreds of lives for years to come. Shaq squeezed his sister's hand. For the first time in a long time, everything felt exactly right. A few weeks after the grand opening, Serena suggested something Shaq never expected. "Let's go home," she said one quiet morning. "To Wilmington, to Mom and Dad. It's been too long since we went together." They drove the familiar road together, just the two of them. The kids stayed back with friends, giving their mom and uncle this private moment. As the miles passed, old memories came flooding back. Childhood streets, the park where they played, the little house where they grew up. The silence between them was comfortable now, filled with years of shared history. The cemetery was peaceful under the shade of old oak trees. Shaq and Serena walked slowly to their parents' joint headstone. Serena knelt first, gently placing a bouquet of bright yellow roses, their mother's favorite, beside white lilies for their dad. Shaq stood beside her, the weight of the moment settling over both of them. "I miss them every single day," Serena whispered, tracing the names on the stone with her fingers. "Mom especially. She always knew what we needed even before we did." Shaq nodded, his throat tight. "Dad would be so proud of this center, of you running it, of the way you've raised Jamal and Kayla." They sat on the grass together, the quiet broken only by birdsong and the rustle of leaves. Serena reached into her bag and pulled out a small, worn basketball keychain from Shaq's very first Jordan Brand launch. She placed it carefully at the base of the headstone. "I kept this all these years," she said softly. "I was so proud of you, Mike. Even when life pulled us in different directions and I was too stubborn to call, I never stopped believing in you. Not for one day." Shaq felt tears roll down his cheeks. He pulled out the old photo Coach Brooks had given them, the one of young Serena and their mother, and placed it beside the keychain. "You were always my first champion," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Even when I got cut from the team and wanted to quit, you sat outside that bathroom door until I came out. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Now let me be yours, Serena. Let me stand beside you the way you've always stood beside me." Serena turned to him, tears streaming down her face. She leaned into her little brother's big embrace, the kind of hug they hadn't shared in decades. "I was so scared of needing you that I almost lost you," she cried. "I'm sorry for pushing you away for so long." "I'm sorry for staying away," Shaq whispered, holding her tighter. "We're here now. That's what matters. No more distance. No more pride keeping us apart. Mom and Dad would want us to hold on to each other like this." They stayed there for a long time, talking about old memories, laughing through tears at funny stories from their childhood, and promising each other a better future. As they finally stood to leave, Serena looked back at the headstone one last time. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered. "For everything." Shaq put his arm around his sister's shoulders as they walked back to the car. The drive home felt lighter. The gravesite visit hadn't just been about saying goodbye to the past. It had been about finally healing it. Brother and sister, side by side again, ready to face whatever came next, together. 1 year to the day after that fateful phone call from Derek, the James Jordan Community Center was celebrating its first anniversary. The building was decorated with balloons, streamers, and photos from the past year. A big banner hung across the entrance. 1 year, 1 community, 1 family. Shaq arrived early, as had become his habit. He had kept his promise to Serena, spending at least 1 full week every month in Charlotte. He even bought a modest house nearby so he could be close without overwhelming her independence. As he walked through the bustling center, the change was impossible to miss. Over 400 kids were now enrolled in programs. The computer lab stayed full, the basketball court echoed with laughter and bouncing balls, and parents attended evening classes on everything from job skills to financial literacy. At the anniversary event, Serena stood proudly at the front as they honored the year's achievements. When it was her turn to speak, her voice was strong and warm. "This center has changed so many lives, including mine and my brother's. Thank you for trusting us. Thank you for letting us be part of your journey." Later in the celebration, Jamal pulled Shaq aside, a big smile on his face. "I got the acceptance letter yesterday. Georgia Tech. Early decision. I'm going to study engineering, Uncle Mike." Shaq pulled his nephew into a tight hug, pride swelling in his chest. "You worked hard for this, Jamal. I'm so damn proud of you. Your mom raised an incredible young man." Jamal grinned. "Couldn't have done it without you either. Those shoes you gave me, I wore them to every big game. They reminded me to keep fighting." Not far away, Kayla was showing off her latest science project. She had qualified for a major state competition and was nervously preparing her presentation. "Uncle Mike, will you help me practice my answers tonight?" she asked, eyes hopeful. "Mom's great, but you're better at the business and real-world side of things." Shaq laughed warmly and ruffled her hair. "Of course, kiddo. Wouldn't miss it for the world." That evening, after most of the guests had gone home, Shaq and Serena sat together in her office, looking through photos from the year. Marcus Reed joined them briefly to share exciting news. The foundation was expanding. They had secured properties for new centers in Atlanta and back home in Wilmington. "We're doing this together," Serena said, looking at her brother with a soft smile. "Your resources, my vision, just like Mom and Dad would have wanted." Shaq nodded, his eyes misty. "I used to think my greatest wins were on the basketball court or in the boardroom. But this, watching these kids grow, seeing Jamal head off to college, Kayla chasing her dreams, and getting my sister back, this is the real legacy." Serena reached over and squeezed his hand. "We built something beautiful, Mike. Not just for us, but for every family that needs hope. Thank you for never giving up on me." As they walked out of the center together that night, arm in arm under the streetlights, Shaq felt a deep sense of peace. The past year had been full of pain, growth, tears, and healing. But looking at his sister, strong and smiling beside him, and knowing the kids were thriving, he knew every hard moment had been worth it. Their mother's words had come true. They had held on to each other, and in doing so, they had created something that would live on long after them, a legacy of love, second chances, and family that refused to be broken. One quiet evening, long after the anniversary celebrations had faded and the center had settled into its regular rhythm, Shaq and Serena found themselves alone on the beautiful new basketball court. The lights were low, the building mostly dark except for the soft glow over the court. Serena was wearing a simple silver pendant around her neck, a gift from Shaq engraved with their mother's words, "Family is everything. Hold on to each other no matter what." They picked up a ball and started shooting hoops the way they used to when they were kids. No fancy moves, no crowds, just brother and sister, laughing when one of them missed, cheering the occasional swish. Serena's form was still surprisingly decent for someone who claimed she didn't like basketball. "You've been practicing," Shaq teased, grinning as she sank a mid-range jumper. Serena laughed softly. "Had to keep up with my little brother somehow." They played for a while in comfortable silence, the sound of the bouncing ball echoing gently through the empty gym. Eventually, they sat on the edge of the court, breathing a little harder, shoulders touching like old times. Shaq looked around at the center, the gleaming floor, the full bookshelves, the quiet pride in everything they had built together. His voice grew thick with emotion. "This center, these kids, us finally being together again. That's my real championship, Serena. All the rings, all the money, all the fame, none of it compares to this. To getting my sister back, to watching Jamal head off to college, and Kayla chase her dreams, to knowing we kept the promise Mom asked us to keep." Serena turned to him, eyes shining with tears. She reached out and hugged him tightly, the kind of hug that carried years of pain, forgiveness, and love. "Welcome home, little brother," she whispered against his shoulder. "I never stopped believing in you, and I'm so grateful you never stopped fighting for us." They held each other for a long time under the quiet lights of the court. No more words were needed. The distance that had once felt impossible to cross had finally been bridged. The pride that had kept them apart had been replaced by something stronger: trust, healing, and unbreakable family bonds. As they walked out of the center together that night, arm in arm, Shaq felt a deep, lasting peace. He had won many battles in his life, but this one, rebuilding his family and creating something meaningful for the community, felt like the greatest victory of all. Their mother's promise had been kept. And in keeping it, Shaq and Serena had given their children, and hundreds of others, something even more valuable than hope. They had given them family.